Hello everyone and welcome to my latest Formula 4 adventure. Now we've done a lot of F4 in iRacing this season, but today we're jumping over to the ranked servers in RaceRoom. There are 23 cars on the grid here at the Red Bull Ring and we're going to be starting from the 5th row. We've qualified in 10th. Now I'm being joined on the grid by my two friends from SCB, Paul Martin and Scott Warner. They're 7th and 8th, but we're quite a way off the pace that those two guys are setting. In fact, we're almost a second a lap slower than the pair of them. So if we're going to improve through the course of this race, perhaps the wisest strategy will be to tuck ourselves in behind Scott and Paul. But to do that, first we've got to survive T1. It can be an absolute nightmare here at the Red Bull Ring. T2 won't be much better either with such a full grid, but the lights have just gone green, so let's get over to the live action to see how we get on. And we're approaching T1 on the inside here. We've got to be really careful. There was a little bit of tyre rubbing with Andre Thursov, I think it was, on the outside. He's backed off to slot in behind in 11th. We've held on to 10th position. Paul Martin up to 6th, Scott Warner up to 7th, so they've both gained a position through T1. However, we may be heading in the other direction as we approach T2 because Andre Thursov's made a move up the inside. He was a little bit later on the brakes, whereas I was a bit more cautious, maybe too cautious. I really expected carnage in that corner, but it looks like every driver on the grid has got through turns 1 and 2 unscathed. I've got to admit I'm surprised with that, but pleasantly surprised. So we're sitting in 11th position now, and actually we've got Scott Warner right in front of us, so Scott must have had his exit from T2 compromised. If you don't get a good run out of that turn up the hill, it costs you a lot of speed down that long straight. So we've got Scott Warner in 10th. Andre Thursov has snuck past into 9th, but there's barely a tenth of a second between the two of them. And speaking of close battles, it looks like that tussle in the rearview mirror is really heating up. There's 2 or 3 cars side by side as we go through Sector 2. Now, hopefully that's going to play into our hands because it will give us a little bit of breathing room. In fact, the gap is already more than a second back to the driver in 12th, Cisco Bayari. But for us, we just need to try and latch onto the back of Scott Warner. Hopefully he'll be able to drag us along to some better lap times. But the yellow flag's right at the final turn. Oh, we almost get collected by the orange car, spinning back onto the racing line. Now that was close. Yeah, close was an understatement there. We'll take another look at that shortly, but first let's just check out the start. I was really worried about my survival chances running into T1, but we actually did okay. We had a tight inside line and there was only a little bit of minor contact right there. That was Andre Thursov trying to thread his way through the smallest of gaps. There wasn't quite room, but he made no mistake at the next turn. Moves out of the draft, brakes perfectly on the inside and makes the pass cleanly. A textbook move at turn 2. But at the final corner it was anything but textbook. Watch the orange car of Hendrik Gerges. He was in 4th place when he suffered a big nudge from behind. Several cars were unable to avoid him, so we got really lucky there. Let's ride on board with Marazi and we can see the contact right there. Sends the orange car into a spin and then even more contact which turns the car right around. Dave Welke was the unlucky driver of the blue car who got collected in that, so that gave us 2 positions. We went from 11th to 9th. And I tell you what, that is some proper battle brewing ahead. Look how close all 5 cars are. There's just 1 second separating Rathman in 4th and Thursov in 8th. And in the middle of it all, Martin and Warner are getting properly stuck in. This is great racing at the Red Bull Ring. We're about half a second behind all, and that's probably the safest place to be at this point. There's a little bit of contact, it looked like, between Warner and Martin. It certainly cost Warner some time, both going into the corner and coming out of it. And now we are right on his tail, just 0.3 of a second behind. Now, I said before the start of the race that our best plan of action would be to try and tuck in behind Scott and then keep with him. We know from his qualifying time that he's lapping around a second faster. But I also know from countless SCB community races that usually we're quite evenly matched on pace. So that suggests to me that I should be able to find a little bit extra in my lap times, and hopefully we can do that by following Scott. Just ahead of Scott, it looks like Paul Martin has worked his way back up to 6th. He's got past Andre Thursov, and Thursov's out in the gravel, so that's going to give us another position. We're up to 8th. Yeah, it was a little bit of SCB tyre rubbing that got us back into contention here. There's Scott just clipping the rear of Paul Martin in T2. Paul quickly recovered from that though. He got back past Andre Thursov into 6th, and then Thursov just pushing a little bit too hard, gets onto the grass but saves it. So Furzov's grass tracking excursion has promoted us up to 8th position and right onto the back of Scott Warner in 7th. Now we said at the start of the race we wanted to try and stick with Scott if at all possible here, but we're going to make a mistake, locking up the brakes right there into T2. We've completely missed the apex. We've got to turn the car even sharper to make the corner, and that's cost us our exit speed. And with that one mistake, we've let Warner get away. He's already opened up a 1.2 second gap immediately, so we're going to jump forward 3 laps. And as you can see on the relative board, bottom left, that 1.2 second advantage has now been stretched to 2 seconds. We just haven't quite got the pace to stick with Scott Warner in front. However, we've got more than enough pace to maintain 8th position. Cisco Bayari is more than 2 seconds behind. However, we're going to be given an opportunity to close the gap right in because Warner has locked up the brakes into T2. It's cost him all his speed, much like what happened to us a few laps ago. Have we got the drive to pull alongside Warner here? It doesn't quite look like we have, so we're going to tuck back in behind him. But yeah, we're right on his tail again now. Oh, but we might have just run it in a little bit too hot into this right hand and just missed the apex. That is going to cost us a valuable 10th or 2. Warner and Michael Rathman were having a cracking battle for 6th position. This was Warner just having a look up the inside into T2. He thinks better of it, but then has to get on the brakes really hard, and that's what costs him the speed that brings me right into play. I try and get alongside, but we just didn't have the might. Over the next couple of laps, Warner reeled Rathman back in to the point where he's considering another overtake, this time on the outside into T2, and he's breezed past. That overtake is signed, sealed and delivered before he even makes it to the corner. It didn't look like Rathman put up any sort of a fight to defend that position, and with just 3 minutes of the race left, it leads me to wonder whether Rathman might not have put enough fuel in. Is he easing off the throttle to try and nurse that car to the finish line? It definitely looks like it because we are rapidly gaining on him here. Once again, we're a little bit hot into that turn. That's going to give Rathman a 10th or 2 back, but I'm confident that we're in good shape to take 7th position here. Something is clearly not right with Rathman's car. Oh, there's clearly something very wrong with it now because he's sideways in the gravel. So taking 7th position was even easier than I thought it would be. The yellow flags are out. Is that for Rathman, or has there been another accident? There has been another accident. Oh no, it's Paul Martin. Martin has crashed out of a top 5 position, so that has promoted us to 6th. So I checked the replay to see if Rathman had had any sort of incident that would have caused him to pick up damage. I couldn't see anything, so yeah, it must be that he's preserving fuel for these last couple of laps to get him home. Warner had no problem making the pass then, and within a couple of corners, I was right on Rathman's tail too. However, I didn't need to overtake him because he ended up drifting off into the gravel, as did Paul Martin on the very next turn, unfortunately. Now, to get to the bottom of Martin's misfortune, we've got to go back to the very first corner. That contact there gave Paul some suspension damage, which he was wrestling with for the entire race, and it finally gave up on him. Now, we saw Andre Furzov make exactly the same mistake in the early stages. He was able to save it, however Paul, with his suspension damage, wasn't. So anyway, that crash promoted us to 6th position, and we spent the last couple of laps chasing Scott Warner home, much like we did in the GT3 race at Watkins Glen a couple of weeks ago. Now, we knew before the race had even started that Scott had the edge over us in terms of pace and lap time, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to challenge for 5th position in this last lap. However, I was really happy with 6th from 10th on the grid. Here are the classified results then, and yeah, a quick glance at the best lap times will soon tell us that we were well off Scott's pace. His fastest lap was a 1:35.4, ours was a 1:36.4, a full 1 second slower. Paul Martin was able to rejoin and bring it home in 12th, while Michael Rathman ended up way down in 15th. So all in all, a pretty decent midweek outing in the RaceRoom ranked servers this week. Top 6 finish from 10th on the grid, I will certainly take that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching, and thanks as always for joining me in my racing adventures. I'll be back on the grid again very soon for another video, but until then, enjoy your racing and have fun out there.